All behavior is the result of choice. Sometimes our decisions are made at an unconscious or subconscious level. For example, we opt to avoid a conflict by repressing our true feelings. Later, our emotions become so strong that we can no longer suppress them. And some small incident triggers an overkill response. This was a quote from Eldon Taylor's coming from some of his books. One of them is called Mind Programming, a pretty famous one, and this is, I think, a good example of how most people live their lives whenever it comes to solving conflicts or handling verbal confrontations of any sort. When most people face a conflict, usually, maybe you included, they kind of retreat into their shell and avoid the conflict actually by never clearly saying what they had in their mind. They repress themselves, stop themselves from clearly saying out loud what they think, what they feel, specifically if they have been hurt, and they may not even be honest enough with themselves to realize why they are upset in the first place. Maybe they think they know because it is because I want to protect others. Yeah, probably you want to be protected yourself in many cases. For example, if it is your narrative in your head, you may want to be protected yourself, but because you were hurt in the past, you have trouble expressing what happened to you, and now you feel infuriated whenever somebody is trapped in a situation that doesn't feel right. I actually used to be like that, to feel like that without really knowing it. I just felt like my situation when I was a teenager, for some reasons that I won't completely go into details about, somehow my situation didn't feel right, and since I couldn't really express it because no one really cared around me why I was not feeling at my place during those years, a symptom that developed as a consequence was my jaw became really constricted like this, and I couldn't speak freely anymore. It was a physical consequence of something that was happening inside my head. I know some people pointed out how not articulate I was in the past on my videos. It was not a problem of speaking English, it was actually a problem of this jaw being constricted like that. Took me like 2 years of vocal coaching with a genius coach about that to resolve. Sometimes I may still have a bit of trouble around here, but just to say, those things happen to everyone and we may all have different symptoms. On me it was mostly physical, for others it might be mostly emotional. They might be emotionally triggered without knowing why or without knowing how to calm themselves down, and whenever they face this type of person or talk about this type of topic, they can't control themselves. And at some point this might cause a lot of relationship issues in your life, both professionally and in your personal life. You may have trouble to have a healthy communication with your wife, with your husband, with anybody around you that you would like to make friends with and you don't really know how. And all those repressed feelings that just cause massive damage. On the opposite, after having been working so much on my communication skills through the years, one thing I could say today is that I can sense people's vibe or energy or emotions or just feelings and demeanor from the outside before they even speak. As a consequence of that, I kind of know how to say whatever I want to say by adapting it to the person I have in front of me, even before anything happens. And therefore I can avoid any kind of conflict that might happen, because obviously I don't always agree with everyone deep down, but I can always adapt what I'm gonna say. If I sense the person is going to be a pain in the ass anyway, I will adapt. It does not mean I will not say what I wanted to say, but I will add more details prior to saying what I wanted to enumerate as a judgment I may have about the situation, about what the person is talking about. I will have a certain way of expressing my ideas so that I calm down the emotions of the person before saying it. That way, from the outside, you may think I was just lucky because I never enter into any useless argument. Well, I was not lucky because in the past I got into countless arguments that led nowhere. Today I know how to speak to people depending on where they come from. For example, I perfectly know who I can use strong language with and who I better avoid using any strong language, because it's just going to end up, if I use a strong language about a specific topic that is emotional for them, I will just not use any strong term in the way I express my opinion on the topic, because I know it might trigger the person. And when somebody is getting emotionally triggered, then logic and arguments and statements lose value, because when the person is into the limbic brain, into the emotional system, it is just ending up into a useless verbal fight that is leading nowhere. What I noticed through the years was that many times I tend to use a combination of 3 sleight of mouth patterns, maybe 2, sometimes just 2, usually 3, but whenever I was studying how I said this, how I said that, what made that person agree with me, how is it possible that I could solve this conflict at work, I noticed I was never really using just one sleight of mouth pattern. I usually used a combination of several patterns at the same time. And as I say in many videos, one sentence you say may very seldom be coming down to only one linguistic structure. Probably everything you say can be explained from a sleight of mouth perspective with different language patterns from the model. So in any case, it is always a mix of different patterns, but on top of that, I noticed whenever I was mentioning my opinion or solving a conflict in some way, either professionally or in my private life, I was always kind of assembling together different patterns. And there is a curious thing about this number 3, why 3 patterns more than 4 or than 2 or than just 1. Pythagoras had a saying, which I don't know if it is true because I'm not sure if I am a big believer in numerology, but maybe it is true to some extent. He said number 3 was the number of magic to some extent because it was the number of harmony, wisdom and understanding, which is maybe just evasive, but more specifically it is also the number of past, present and future, the number of birth, life and death, the number of beginning, middle and end. Basically you can find many meanings, many deeper meanings about the number 3. I just noticed using sleight of mouth patterns in sets of 3 was more effective most of the time than just trying to use one. I guess in any way using several patterns at the same time is helping to shut down the critical mind of the person listening to you. So if you use, for example, something I use quite often is a model of the world in conjunction with a consequence pattern, and many times this is shutting down the person's idea, or at least make them quiet and make them listen to me, which otherwise they may not have done at all. They may have just kept interrupting me non-stop because they thought I was wrong anyway. And using that kind of combo, that combination, model of the world, so from the perspective of science, from this philosophical perspective, from this scientific perspective, from the perspective of Abraham Maslow, whoever I am mentioning, just from the perspective of, so I distanced myself. This person, or like Maslow said that the hierarchy of needs is this and this and that. Therefore, I thought that when I put emphasis on this in my life, it works better. Model of the world, consequence, because of this perspective, I think that blah blah blah. It is one combination like that. And whenever I use a combination like this, people open their ears much more carefully, like they're much more widely, like they listen carefully to what I say. Compared to before, where I would just say directly the thing I wanted to say without using that structure, that is a kind of sugarcoating, embellishing what I'm going to say, which might appear manipulative, but in the end we all manipulate each other every day. Specifically babies, if you have a young child, they just try to manipulate your opinion about when to give them food and when not to give them food. For example, not that I have kids, but I have noticed that in many other people. Just the way you are going to present your ideas can completely differentiate the response you're going to get. And we don't really care about who's right, who's wrong, it's just about who is the best communicator in the end. Now, I know it might sound like way too much mental work to try to use different patterns at the same time as you speak. I know most people who try to study sleight of mouth already have trouble to just use one pattern because they read about how it works and then they find themselves in a conversation and they interrupt their trail of thoughts and try to think again about what they read about and try to use it on the spot. doesn't work like this. You have to automate language before using it in a real conversation. And to that extent, for the very first time, I have released the 3 best combinations I found over the years. So a combination of 3 patterns. Model of the world and consequence is not one of them. It is just an example I give you here. In this method I just launched down below, it is basically 3 combinations of 3 patterns each, so 9 patterns in total, but 1 combination per set of 3 patterns. And every time I explain to you in the course where specifically can you use that, why those 3 work together, and what kind of conversation can you use that into for the best results. One of those combinations will be specifically for if you are in a serious confrontation or with somebody who is acting seriously confrontational, and the others will be more malleable. They can be used in any kind of circumstances. It is more about automating your language so that you naturally use several patterns at the same time, and I give you exercises obviously to accomplish that. That way you will just have a better way of expressing whatever you want to say. And specifically if you are in front of somebody who is not letting you speak, who always knows everything better than you according to them, and who whatever you have to say, they will just try to win the group's attention above what you can provide, what you can share, even when your opinion really matters, because of ego, because of validation, because of narcissism, whatever the cause is. Those people, there is a way, there is a way without being aggressive, without trying to yell the loudest. There is a very simple method to shut those people down while appearing smarter and not more aggressive. Because if you appear aggressive inside a group, you appear like a dick, which sometimes will be required anyway, but most of the time it is not required, and you can just take the lead inside the group at your job, or even with people, if you are a coach, with people who just have this narrative in their head that nothing works, the world is ending, their life is going to end, whatever. You can just interrupt that trail of thoughts and inject in their mind a new thought. With one of those structures of 3 patterns used at the same time, you can very easily insert an idea into the unconscious mind of the person without appearing like you're trying to force it or like you're trying to impose anything. You will just let the idea emerge in their mind later, because you have planted the idea with different sleight of mouth patterns all at the same time. So there are countless combinations that you could use. The 3 I gave you in the method down below in the description are, I think, the best ones. You may disagree, you may have your own opinion. The best is actually that you try it out for yourself and you notice which patterns work the best for me. But to save you time, because I know not everyone has 150 hours in front of him to study, to test everything like I had, so I just give you the best combinations I found so that you save time in the process of learning how to use a sleight of mouth. It is down below in the description. There is a special offer on this new course until February 5, and then you can obviously ask any questions if you want to know how to use that in a specific context with a person. Just type me if you want. If you have an example in mind of somebody you really don't know how to discuss with, or like you want to solve the conflict, or like you want to solve the relationship, resolve something in that relationship at work or in your private life, and you just have no idea, you can also contact me and I can very easily give you ideas, at least a trail of thoughts for how to discuss with that person and make them understand your point of view. Maybe sometimes you need to understand theirs too, so that you have a better communication. It's always depending on the context, but in any case, there is a way out and you can learn to communicate better with that. It is down below if you want to check it out, and in any case, keep working. I'm watching you.